Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome an accomplished storyteller and a filmmaker from Mumbai, India, Mr. Sidharth Jain. Sidharth, welcome to the show.
Hello, sir. It's a privilege to be on your show.
Thank you. Sidharth is the founder of The Story Inc., which is India's leading book-to-screen adaptation company. He's also the founder of the House of Talkies, which is a content studio, and he was earlier with Hotstar, AdLab Films, iRock Films, and Hyperion Studio. So, Sidharth, before we come to the stories and the Story Inc., tell me about your own journey and what inspired you to move into the world of media and storytelling.
I have built my career with a lot of trial and error. I was one of those kids who thought that we had clarity. When I was 16, I wanted to be in the stock markets and I wanted to be an investment banker. But by the time I finished my master's in finance and spent 6-8 years trading in the stock markets, I realized I'm good at it, but it's not for me. And with a series of trial and error, I kind of started a dot-com company. I sold that. With that money, I went to Los Angeles to meet a friend. And that meeting kind of changed my mind and focus. And I decided I should jump into this world of producing. And I was fortunate that, it happened at a time when I was in LA. It was a time when I had some resources. So I could experiment. I could, try a few things out. And now it's been 20 years since that experiment. I worked out of LA for some time, then back in India. And, my interest kind of came out of doing something that uh, no one had done. So I wanted to produce an international film 25 years ago with a commercial star like Salman Khan, an American actress, American director. So actually that prospect of doing something different, interested me. And then I've built a career in Bollywood trying to do things that most people don't want to do. And so the moment I see there's something interesting which nobody wants to pursue, my hand goes up first.
Amazing. 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 And it's not an easy industry to be in from whatever little I know of the industry.
I think easy is an easy word. I think it's the most difficult profession to survive and thrive in for more than a few years.
That's what I've heard.
And yes, so it's tough. It's not a real business profession to pursue.
Correct.
Unless you're a large studio that does distribution.
Absolutely. But your series Trial by Fire was a breakout success. And I watched it.
Oh, you did.
Given your amazing background and your passion for this industry, what did this journey teach you personally and professionally?
See, Trial by Fire started as a very personal, it started as me trying to do a deal. I'll take a minute and just
Absolutely
give you context. I was doing a deal for that book rights with another producer in the first year of starting my company Storying in 2018. And as I was doing the deal, I met the parents, on whom the series is based. And, meeting them changed my perspective towards the story and the incident. And, it kind of, I looked at the justice system and I looked at, people like we don't know the details. We don't know what really happened. And I thought it needs to be documented in the right way.
correct.
And then that became like a personal mission for me. And the parents were highly, supportive that, they said, okay, we'll take your time. You figure this out. And then I, was fortunate to, actually then collaborate with some amazing filmmakers. Then the whole team came together, the partners who came together, Netflix and everybody, right? Right from Prashant Nair, the creator, to Randeep Jha, who directed it with him, and them all. It takes a whole village, right, to make something.
Correct.
So I can take only a little credit for figuring it out, putting all the dots together, and then like enabling the process. And that really was a personal mission, and it, I think, will remain one of the most important stories that I have told, and I think I will tell.
Absolutely. And I know at least one of the families who lost everything in that fire.
Right.
So, Siddharth, now let's talk about the Story Inc.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people would love to send their books to you. My question is, what makes a story screen adaptable? And are there any genres that or formats that OTT platforms are more inclined towards?
Uh, you know, I wish there was an easy answer that I could give you and
Sure.
everybody who's listening to this.
Yeah,
The answer is basically, see, audiences don't know what they want to watch in the future,
correct.
right? They're watching what's available to them in the present. What will fill them with wonder or a compelling story?
Mm,
They don't know. Because they don't know, it's up to us who are the gatekeepers to figure what's exciting and compelling. And keeping in mind that the day we spot a story, and it might be 2 to 3 years by the time it reaches the audience.
mm,
So will it still remain that exciting,
correct.
compelling, and fresh
Mm,
even 2 and 3 years from now for the audiences?
mm,
That's one. So finding a very compelling story that can stand the test of time is
right.
extremely important. Secondly, if you look at anything on screen, it's all about what the characters are doing and speaking.
Mm,
Screenplay is what? Action dialogue, right? Action dialogue. Now, first of all, any story that's compelling, that's exciting, that's marketable, that's high concept and entertaining has to then have the legs for it to be constantly told through only action and dialogue.
mm,
There's no thinking. There's no, like, try to imagine what's going on in the mind, like a book or written material.
mm,
So then we have to see the ability of it to translate into a good screenplay.
mm,
And thirdly, which is most important, will that story attract the right talent? Will
right.
it excite the right filmmaker? Will it excite the right screenwriter? Will
Mm,
it excite the right actor? And hence, will it excite the financer? So all of these stages and dots have to connect.
mm,
Hence, it's like finding a needle in a haystack.
mm. Very true.
And genres work, there are always genres that work. So I can say horror is a good genre, but there are terrible stories in the genre of horror as well. So a good story, well told, which times the market right in terms of audience expectation, well marketed, well produced.
Mm,
It's just that, so it's a good story can go wrong and a not so good story can be extremely successful.
absolutely. What a great response. Um, Siddharth, you also represented over 300 authors and screenwriters.
Yeah.
What do most writers misunderstand about adaptations?
One, they don't understand the reality of time.
Hmm.
Also it can take years for a story to get noticed and be just right to be developed for screen. So it's a process which you have to just let go, and then maybe in 6 months, 6 years, 10 years, something can happen with it, because there's no hurry.
Correct.
Right, that's one.
Hmm.
Because you're still, the story is still part of hay.
Hmm.
It takes time, or it takes the right moment for it to be the needle that a producer wants to pick and then pursue.
Right.
Right, that's one.
Hmm.
The other thing that they don't understand usually is that it's a different medium, right? Screenplay and screen telling. So a lot of things will change.
Hmm.
If the book has sold 10, 20, 30 million copies and we have so many fans like Harry Potter, then the change will be much less.
Yes.
But if a book doesn't have a large audience,
Hmm.
then the filmmaker's job is to really take that story, translate to screenplay in a way that it finds that large audience.
Hmm.
And the process of taking a story that hasn't found audiences yet will involve change.
Hmm.
And that flexibility is very important for a storyteller to have, because as a writer of writing a book, you can do that alone. It's your vision.
Yeah.
But when we take it to screen, it is the vision of the filmmaker and the full team that
Absolutely.
comes. 200 people come together to make a collective vision happen.
Hmm.
That journey is something that one needs to be very mindful of.
Very well said. And I think you've defined this process so beautifully. Most people just assume once I send my book, within a few months I should see the film.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, you've been in the industry, Siddharth, for, you were telling me, over 2 decades. What are some of the biggest shifts you have observed in Indian storytelling over the past 20 years?
Wow. You know, So I wish, there was a very, very dramatic shift, but I feel we haven't made that much progress in terms of dramatic storytelling in the last 20 years. In fact, I would say in a lot of areas we have dipped, right? So, for example, I would say the writing bit, the filmmaking bit, right? While technology has become better, we get more money to make things, the VFX, all that is great, right? But I think the inherent, you know, uh, ability to write a terrific script and direct it, I think we're still struggling on that front as an industry, especially in Hindi. I feel the system, the corporate system of the last 15 years has actually hampered that growth and shift in the right direction.
Right.
But at the same time, I think what's really drastically changed is our ability to tell now different kind of stories seamlessly. For example, with the advent of streamers coming into our life and with technology of streaming, I think the same filmmakers who would tell a story in 2 hours as a film have now found a way to tell a good story, say in 8 hours or 6 hours over 6, 8 episodes, right? And not still succumb to the television, volume,
Right.
right, of a daily soap. So I think that ability has now been developed in the industry, and we can see the results. I think some good content is coming out in episodic, which was never happening in India earlier. It used to happen very early days, and then kind of it dipped, and then the daily soap took over. Then films were kind of left on one side. I think that's the biggest shift. And of course, technology, I think, has helped us tell stories in a better way. It's largely that. And I think, and the third thing I would say is efficiency.
Yeah.
The efficiency of storytelling has also become better because we're able to use the resources in a better way. But I must say, we have to be hopeful because there is some very good pool of talent that's come into the business in the last few years.
Correct.
And, those results will now come. So I'm very optimistic and hopeful, about the future.
Absolutely. And I'm much older than you, and I remember the time when our entire entertainment was the Wednesday Chitrahar and the Sunday movie on Doordarshan.
Right.
Today, where OTT is virtually showing everything of around the world. But my question to you is, how do global OTT platforms view Indian content? What excites them and what worries them?
See, if you see, I work with all the major, American studios who are in India, and they're all looking at local success. Their thinking is very hyper local, right? So they want, when they come to India, they want Indians to consume the content that they make in India primarily. That's a primary goal. So Hindi, they want to make more content in Hindi for Indians to watch here. They want to make in Tamil and Telugu and other regional languages. So that's their primary goal. The secondary market is the NRIs who live outside India, who are subscribers of the platforms. So they also want them to consume the content. The third tier, which is non-Indians consuming content outside India, Indian content, that I think is low on their priority.
Okay.
Unlike the assumption in the early years, everybody in India thought that when a US studio will come here, we will be able to reach out to a global audience. So in theory, we do reach out to a global audience, but will they watch our content in large numbers like they watch the K dramas and Korean content? I think there is still a lot of room there.
Correct. Still
So it's primarily it's local success, because also just look at the market, right? The market potential for the US companies is to gain more subscribers from India for growth. They don't have China. So the next best bet is India. Right. So they want more subscribers from India. That's why they want to give more local content.
Well said. The other aspect that I wanted to get your perspective on was on how the data or audience analytics is driving content development. And you run two, one studio and one story Inc. How do you use content analytics?
So I don't use too much of data for the work that I do, because data is telling me the past, right? And if in the past, if the audience has loved horror films, that doesn't mean now if I have to now surprise them, I have to go against the trend and against it and give them something that they don't expect.
Hmm.
So the way I look at it as a creator, I don't look at data.
Hmm.
We rely heavily on instinct that has, which comes from our own personal data of experience of the last
Hmm.
2 decades, right? So that's my pattern. But if you look at the streamers, they rely heavily on data because they have data that's very real and current.
Hmm.
And their data indicates more of the taste and preference. So a lot of their choices are driven by data
Hmm.
because they're in the business of distribution.
Hmm.
They want the right content to reach the right consumer. But as a creator, I look at distribution as my secondary goal.
Hmm.
I look at, filling the audience with wonder as my primary goal. So we don't use as much data. And I think the marriage of the two is what really makes this work.
Hmm. Well said. Uh, you know, from when you look at from the Western content, biopics and docu-series have become very, very big. Do you see a similar trend in India as well?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's always there's more interest and appetite for real stories, whether they're biopics or incidents. Definitely. But it's just that, we don't have that much in the right genres. For example, I'll give you, like, for example, the US is filled with crime, true crime. It's big over there. India, true crime, I don't know. I mean, we should have much more true crime than Americans, but somehow we don't have enough serial killers. We don't have enough of those kind of stories, which are the commercial genres.
Hmm.
Hence, we don't see so much of real stories in India as much as in the West.
Hmm.
But I think, it's growing. It's the number one interest genre, for India now.
Very interesting. Siddharth, you're also a bridge between authors, screenwriters, producers, and platforms. How do you maintain creative alignment across all stakeholders?
So I think number one is about being objective, more objective and less subjective.
Hmm.
I don't try and bring my personal bias into the specifics of any story and project.
Hmm.
And I think it's important because then I have to be neutral.
Hmm.
I have to help connect the dots. For example, if I don't watch horror films, doesn't mean I can't put together a horror project,
Hmm.
right? So I think that's number one. B, I operate extremely transparently and I
Hmm.
try to be as neutral and fair as I can.
Hmm.
Transparency is really the main pillar of what, the way we operate.
Hmm.
So I think between being transparent and being objective,
Hmm.
I think these two qualities are important enough to then be that bridge that connects the various dots.
Hmm.
And yeah, and I think thirdly is knowing the industry inside out.
Hmm.
After so many years, you learn what not to do,
Correct.
and you still don't know specifically what to do,
Hmm.
but at least you know what we should not do. And I think that experience helps the other stakeholders kind of navigate their way like around the business.
Well said. What new genres or storytelling formats are you personally excited about to explore in the next few years?
So for me personally, I think it's a coming back. The circle is kind of, we are coming back to films. After COVID, I think in the last 5 years and maybe like a year before, last 5, 6 years have been very difficult for the film format with streaming and episodic and YouTube and reels and everything kind of taking so much of our like attention. I thought films took a back seat. For me personally, this is the year of revival of feature films.
Mhm.
So I am most excited about bringing that back into, not only for me, but I think for the industry as a whole. We can sense that shift, and it's a great opportunity for storytellers,
Mm.
filmmakers to now bring the audiences back into the theaters
Mm.
with really compelling films.
Mm.
And so I think that for me is the big change.
Mm.
The other, I think I'm curious to see how AI will help us tell stories in a better way.
Mm.
How will it help us improve different areas and departments of filmmaking?
Mm.
Including writing. I don't know. I mean, so far, we've seen it helps in the technical aspects of technology, right? So, like like visual effects,
Mm.
like editing, subtitling, a lot of those areas. So I think between reviving films and keeping a close eye on AI, I think we've got enough to do for the next few years.
Absolutely. And you're right. AI and technology must be a game changer for all of you as well, isn't it?
Hopefully, I think these are all tools, right? So I think once we have all the right tools with us and we
Yeah.
learn how to use the tools,
Mhm.
we'll definitely, be more efficient and hopefully more entertaining.
Absolutely. Siddharth, I have time for two more questions for you. Can you share an example of an adaptation that surprised you with its success or transformation from page to screen?
I would really talk about Trial by Fire because I've been so close to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
When we read the book and we heard the incident, and I have to give, credit to my director, Prashant Nair, and showrunner. It was quite a challenge of how do we tell this story, because, if you look at the incident, there was the incident and then 25 years of fighting in the court.
Hmm.
So it doesn't have a lot of plot twists.
Hmm.
The audience will not hear hours of, you know, uh, discussion in the courtroom. It's not a courtroom drama
Hmm.
story.
Hmm.
Yet it's a lot of emotion, right? So
Correct.
the book was written as a very factual book,
Hmm.
a factual book written by the parents who've gone through so much of turmoil. And it was just, they're not professional writers.
Yeah.
So they wrote what they went through. Now, it was a very difficult task. We really took, I think, almost a year to just figure how would we tell the story. And then if you've seen the show, we have got two parts to the screenplay. Each episode, there is one is track A,
Yeah.
which follows the journey of the parents.
Hmm.
In track B, we are seeing different families of victims.
Yeah.
And we see them in different episodes. We look at different characters,
Hmm.
and all of that comes together in the end.
Yeah.
Right. So finding that structure really, and then the show was made so well by the whole team
Hmm.
that, when I saw, I was like, wow, when we were sitting on day one with the book and where we have reached is a great example of adaptation because it's a great example in every department. One is, recreating that era,
Yeah.
recreating the fire, the incident, the panic, and most of all, the emotional trauma
Correct.
and the emotional journey, right? That the audience has to go through. Because, when you're reading, you can imagine it in your head.
Hmm.
But on screen, you have to see the imagination and then feel it.
Right.
And it's very difficult to move audiences
Hmm.
emotionally. In
Correct.
this world where attention is so difficult to get,
Hmm.
how do you get for a story like this for someone to watch 7 episodes or
Absolutely.
40 minutes each? So
Absolutely.
for me, I think it was a great, and it remains actually one of the finest, I would say, examples of adapting something like this.
Hmm.
I mean, if you look at Chernobyl,
Hmm.
like amazing, you know, uh,
Yeah.
Mindhunter,
Hmm.
these are all great examples of how you take something, but then you take it to screen, there's so much more that comes into it.
Hmm.
Like the book then remains only 10% of how will you tell the story?
Hmm. Well
The
said.
craft.
Yeah. 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 Well said. And my last question for you, Siddharth. What is your vision for the House of Talkies and the Story Inc. in the next few years?
Well, I think for the Story Inc., really, I think the vision is to continue doing what you're doing
Yeah.
in whichever way. See, for me, Story Inc. is not really a business
Hmm.
in the way I've never looked at Story Inc. as a business that has to grow. It's got ambition. No, Story Inc. for me is something that someone had to do it
Hmm.
for the industry to kind of find solutions to some of the problems. So I find Story, I've always wanted to be a company, a story company that solves story problems for everybody involved
Hmm.
and be that neutral, warm home
Hmm.
for creators and producers to come to. I
Right.
never wanted to operate like a cold professional agency. That's not what we are.
Yeah.
That's not what I am. That's not what I want the organization to be.
Right.
So I want to be like home. Someone just come to the office, look at some books, read some scripts, find something. So that's the vision. So I
Right.
just want to expand that as much as I can. Maybe regional and maybe international. So that's the vision for Story.
Fascinating.
For House of Talkies, I think, I want to really focus on telling stories for both the screens, both the formats, right? I think series and films. But I want to be the one who finds unique stories. I'm not driven by the usual commercial content because that others are doing and they're doing it really well. I don't want to do what everybody is doing, uh, like, clockwork
Mm.
or, efficiency. I want to look at areas of storytelling where stories are neglected.
Mm.
Because I feel for me, filmmaking is also documenting a lot of things, right? It's documenting either the pop culture, if it's fiction, if it's, non-fiction, if it's something real like Trial by Fire. I look at it as an opportunity to create a legacy of stories. Now that, I've spent so much of time being on this side of the business, for me, the vision for House of Talk is to really expand that now,
Yeah.
create a lot of stories that can go to screen, films, and series,
Mm.
and just build that. And also, I think the other main thing that I want to again focus on is taking Indian stories global,
Mm.
but not the way we do it, like make it here further. I think attract talent from international, markets,
Mm.
get them to tell our stories in their way.
Mm.
For example, like Slumdog Millionaire,
Yeah.
let's get a filmmaker from like Gandhi. These stories have traveled because we got filmmakers from the West
Correct.
to come here, pick up an Indian story,
Mm.
and tell it to their people in their way.
Absolutely.
Right. So that really for me is a larger focus for
Mm.
House of Talkies.
Absolutely. And good luck with that. But on that note, Siddharth, I just want to say what a fascinating conversation this has been. I think for every Indian, anyone associated with Bollywood is someone you don't normally get to talk to. But what an amazing conversation this has been with you. Thank you for talking to me about Trial by Fire. It was an absolutely amazing story that you produced, and I'm looking forward to many more produced by you. Thank you for talking to me about the Story Inc., the challenges most authors tend to face. And also, thank you for talking to me about the House of Talkies. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.